Jai cannot hold thee, nor mind. Yet without thee we think not, nor speak. Love, who art partial to none, we are equal before thy sight. Taker away of our pain, we salute thee, though we are blind. Come to the heart's black cave, and illumine, thou light of the light.
संस्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Good evening, everyone. Today we're celebrating Swami Yoganandaji's birthday, one of the great direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. He was born in 1861, 2 years before Swamiji. He was actually from Dokhineshwar, the small village where Sri Ramakrishna was living. And he was born to a very aristocratic, wealthy family. So from a young age, he would like going to gardens and plucking flowers. So he would go to the Dokhineshwar garden, the garden in Sri Ramakrishna's, that Kali temple complex. He didn't know anything about Sri Ramakrishna. And he was picking some flowers, and he saw a man there, a middle-aged man, and he thought the man was a gardener. And so he said, "Hey, can you help me pick some flowers?" And the man gladly helped pick some flowers for her. Yogan might have been 10, 11 years old, something like that at the time. It's not known exactly. And that what seemed to be the gardener took the flowers, gave them to him happily. Years later, Yoganandaji came across an article written by Keshav Chandra Sen about Sri Ramakrishna. He was 16 or 17 at the time that he read this article. He was so excited about reading about the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna that Sri Ramakrishna's just in the neighborhood, so let me go visit him. So he takes a copy of the journal with him in which Keshav wrote that article. And he goes to see Sri Ramakrishna. And the moment he sees him, he recognizes him as the person who he thought was a gardener many years earlier when he was a kid. So he actually knew Sri Ramakrishna for a long time, inadvertently. He had his blessings from very early on. And he started visiting him after that. On his second visit, actually, let me mention the first visit, actually. The very first time he met him, Sri Ramakrishna sees him and asks his name. He says, "My name is Jogan." And then Sri Ramakrishna asks, "What is your father's name?" He says, "Nobin Chandra Rai Chaudhary." "My goodness," Sri Ramakrishna replied, "I know your father very well. I used to go to your house quite often and listen to readings from the Bhagavata and other scriptures. Your family members were very respectful towards me." And he told him to come again. And so Yoganandaji came the very next day. And Sri Ramakrishna was very happy to see him. And Sri Ramakrishna recognized that he belonged to his inner circle, Antaranga. And he said to him on the second visit, he said, "It is wonderful that we have come to know each other now. You must come often. You have been born into a noble family and possess many characteristics of spiritual greatness. You will easily advance on this path." Sri Ramakrishna immediately recognized that he was actually one of the 6 people that he considered to be Ishvara Kotis, especially divinely commissioned souls, alongside Brahmanandaji, Vivekananda, and others. So he really held him in very high regard from a spiritual standpoint. Yogan was a very unusual kid. So even when he was playing games with his friends, suddenly he would have these moments when he would just look up at the sky. And on one of these occasions he asked, "Where am I? Certainly I don't belong here. These are not my playmates. I have other friends and companions. I must have come from one of those stars. But which one? I don't know. And why am I here if I belong to another world? Is this all a dream?" So this is the kind of kid he was, full of renunciation from a very young age. So he starts visiting Sri Ramakrishna pretty regularly, but he's not completely sold on sort of exclusively dedicating himself to Sri Ramakrishna at this early point. And he learns about a hatha yogi, somebody who does these physical yogic practices, named Narayan. I've got a hatha yogi here. So he goes to visit Narayan. And Narayan starts teaching him about especially neti and dhauti, how you can swallow a very long piece of cloth and then you pull it out of your throat again as a way of cleansing yourself and purifying yourself. And Jogan was impressed. And he convinced himself the only way to completely overcome lust is to engage in these hatha yoga practices. That was his conviction. And so he starts going to this hatha yogi to take instructions, and then he goes to visit Sri Ramakrishna. And he asks Sri Ramakrishna, "Sir, could you teach me how to conquer lust?" And Sri Ramakrishna tells him, "Chant the name of Hari." Hari meaning the Lord. "Then it will go." Jogin was not impressed. He wanted a kind of a technique, something, not just repeating God's name. He thought that was kind of a generic answer. And he thought, so many people are repeating the name of Hari, why does lust not vanish in them? So that can't be right. So then he goes to the Hatha Yogi and he starts learning these Hatha Yoga techniques. Sri Ramakrishna goes over, picks him up by the hand and says, "Come with me." And then on the walk back to Sri Ramakrishna's room, he says, "Why did you go there? Don't do that. Your mind will only stick to the body if you learn those techniques of Hatha Yoga. It will not thirst after God." Even then, Jogin was not fully convinced. And he thought, well, he's losing a disciple. Maybe he's jealous or something. But then he thought to himself, why don't I do what he told me to do and see what happens? And then later he recalled, he spoke about this as follows. Yogananda says, "Thinking thus, I took the name of Hari with a concentrated mind. And as a matter of fact, shortly afterwards, I began to experience the tangible result mentioned by the master." So it becomes clear here that Sri Ramakrishna would give tailored advice, tailored instructions, teachings to his different disciples and devotees. They were never one-size-fits-all kind of instructions. He understood his inner nature, and he knew that chanting the name of Hari would cure him of lust, and it did. Yogin, at a certain point, he felt the need to help his family with... I said it was a wealthy aristocratic family. It wasn't that wealthy. Okay. But it was aristocratic. And their family's undergoing hardship. And so he felt an obligation, a duty as a son to get a job and help his family. So in 1884, he moves to Kanpur to try to get a job. He actually couldn't get a job. And he was still so interested in spiritual practices that he couldn't really get his mind in the world. While he was in Kanpur, his father came up with an idea because his uncle who was staying with him or seeing him in Kanpur could tell that he had these spiritual and potentially monastic leanings, and his uncle is reporting back to his father, this is trouble. So what did his father do? He said, all right, let me get him married. This is the classic trick in India. And so without informing Jogin, without even telling him, his father made arrangements for his marriage and fixed the bride and everything by talking to the other families. And then when Jogin comes back to Dakshineshwar, he finds out that his father's going to offer him in marriage, and he's furious, of course. And he says, no, I won't marry. Of course, his father is trying to persuade him. His mother's the one who really did it. His mother's weeping and says, even if you don't want to marry my son, marry for my sake. And he couldn't bear to see those tears in his mother's eyes. So he relented. He agreed to marry the beautiful daughter of Madhusudan Rai, who lived near Dakshineshwar. But during the marriage, right after the marriage ceremony, he's supposed to go to the bridal chamber with the bride, and instead he just chanted God's name and refused to go. And people were making fun of him as a result, and he just silently bore it. And after marriage, he and his wife never slept in the same bed. So kind of an unusual married couple. Swami Vivekananda later remarked about Yoganandaji. He said, if there's anyone amongst us who has conquered lust in all respects, it is Jogin. But Jogin was devastated. And after marriage, he kind of felt like his spiritual life was over. He said, as soon as I married, the thought came to me that the hope of God realization was now a mockery. Why should I go to Sri Ramakrishna, whose very first teaching was the renunciation of lust and gold? I've ruined my life because of the tenderness of my heart. Meaning he capitulated to his mother's tears, right? It cannot be reversed. The sooner I die, the better for me. I used to visit the Master daily, but after this event, I stopped going to him altogether and spent my days in utter despair and repentance. So he wouldn't even visit Sri Ramakrishna anymore because he was so depressed after having gotten married. Sri Ramakrishna notices, and he understood after some time the reason for his reluctance to come. So he comes up with an idea. Sri Ramakrishna knew that somebody had given him some money. An acquaintance of Sri Ramakrishna had given him a few rupees to buy something. And Jogen had promised to buy the articles, and he had already sent those articles, whatever they were, articles of clothing or something. And he said he would send the balance soon, send the balance back to him soon, that person. Sri Ramakrishna knew all this. So he thought, okay, I've got a stratagem. So Sri Ramakrishna sends a message to Jogen. What sort of man are you? A man gave you money to buy certain articles, and you have neither returned the balance, nor even sent word when you will return it? And this really hurt Jogen. He thought, what kind of person is this? And he's accusing me of being a cheat, essentially. I'm going to set him straight. I'm going to go to Dakshineshwar and talk to him directly, and then that'll be the last time I ever talk to Sri Ramakrishna. That was his plan. So Jogen comes one day to the Kali temple and then visits Sri Ramakrishna. As soon as Sri Ramakrishna sees Jogen, he tells him, without mentioning anything about this whole affair of the money and all that, he says, what if you are married? Haven't I too been married? What is there to be afraid of in that? If you have the grace of this place, meaning himself, even 100,000 marriages will be powerless to affect you. If you want to live a family life and realize God at the same time, bring your wife here once. I will make both of you fit for that. And if you want to renounce worldly life and attain God, I'll make that also possible for you. That was Sri Ramakrishna. Jogen was stupefied. And it was like a massive burden was lifted from his shoulders. Now, even then, Jogen felt a little guilty about his wife. And he remembered that Sri Ramakrishna said, if you bring your wife, I can bless her too and take care of everything. So he did that. He said to Sri Ramakrishna, Sir, you taught me how to overcome lust. Could you do something for my young wife? What will she do for the rest of her life? Sri Ramakrishna told him, don't worry about your wife. Bring her here once, either on Tuesday or Saturday, and the Divine Mother will grant what is right for her. And he brought his wife to her. Sri Ramakrishna blessed her by touching her head. And then he said to Jogen, you will not have to worry about her anymore. And Sri Ramakrishna ended up taking full responsibility for her. And we'll see that in a second, actually. So nonetheless, marital life was troubled for Jogen. He wasn't interested in making a living and tending after his wife. And then his mother says, if you don't care to earn money, why did you marry? And then Jogen says, didn't I tell you again and again that I had no intention of marrying? But I had to give way to your tears. What do you mean? Said his mother. How could you marry unless you had the desire to do so? So he is completely stunned by this and disenchanted. And he says, gracious God, I committed the act to please my mother, meaning he got married. And now she talks like this. Fie on the world. Sri Ramakrishna is the only person I have met whose words and thoughts are in perfect accordance. And he developed tremendous dispassion toward the world after that point. So I can't go through all the different incidents with him and Sri Ramakrishna, but one day he wanted to test Sri Ramakrishna. And he sometimes would stay overnight with Sri Ramakrishna. One day he noticed that in the middle of the night, Sri Ramakrishna is missing. He says, that's strange, where did he go? And then the thought crossed his mind that maybe he's going to see his wife. And so he goes in the dead of night and looks to see whether Sri Ramakrishna was up there. And then Sri Ramakrishna comes from the Panchavati where he was meditating and notices Yogananda. And he says, hello, why are you standing here? And Jogen was so embarrassed he couldn't say anything. And he was kind of ashamed. But Sri Ramakrishna, he understood immediately what was going on just from looking at his face. And he said, well, you are quite right. You must examine a sadhu by day and by night before believing in him. So he encouraged him. And even though Jogen was forgiven by Sri Ramakrishna, he couldn't sleep that entire night. He felt so guilty. Another incident, he's on a boat one day. He's coming from Kolkata to Dakshineshwar, and he could tell where Jogen was going. He was going to visit Sri Ramakrishna, even though he didn't say anything. And that person started abusing Sri Ramakrishna. And he said to Jogen, he's a mere pretender, practicing deceit on the public. He eats good food, sleeps on a cozy bed, and turns the heads of schoolboys. And Jogen was very hurt by the comment, but he was soft by nature, and so he didn't say anything. And then when he came to see Sri Ramakrishna, he told Sri Ramakrishna about exactly what happened. Sri Ramakrishna scolded him. He says, what? They're criticizing your guru and you didn't say anything? He says, you should have said something. He said, do you know what the scriptures say? You must cut off the head of him who speaks ill of your guru, or at least leave his presence at once. And you did not even protest against these false accusations? And interestingly, again, this is another illustration of how Sri Ramakrishna would tailor his instructions to different disciples. Swami Niranjananandaji, Niranjan, the young Niranjan, when he was on a boat, somebody was abusing Sri Ramakrishna. He got so furious, he started rocking the boat and threatening to capsize it if they didn't stop talking ill about his guru. And then Niranjananandaji reported the incident to Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna said, scolded him, why did you say that? You should have kept silent. So he gave exactly the opposite advice to these two different disciples of his, depending on their temperaments. He could see that in Niranjan, that he had a bit of a temper. And so the thing to do is to be quiet. Jogen had a very soft nature. So for him, he should have spoken up and defended his guru. Just a few days before Sri Ramakrishna left his body, he's in Kashipur, suffering from throat cancer. And the elder Gopal, who later became Advaitanandaji, he gave Sri Ramakrishna 12 Gerua cloths, ochre cloths, and Sri Ramakrishna gave one of them to Jogen, obviously meaning that he's blessing him to become a monk. And just a few days before Sri Ramakrishna left his body, Sri Ramakrishna asked Jogen to bring an almanac and to read the events of each day and the positions of the stars. And when Jogen finished reading about the 16th of August, 1886, Sri Ramakrishna told him to stop at that point and to put the almanac back. And then, lo and behold, he passed away at 1:02 a.m. On 16th August. Right after Sri Ramakrishna left his body, he travels with Holy Mother to different places of pilgrimage. Obviously, everybody's devastated. Naturally, his wife, Holy Mother Sharada Devi, will also be devastated. But it's quite unusual. A few things happened that were quite unusual. First of all, Holy Mother had at that point not yet initiated anybody. But suddenly she had a vision of Sri Ramakrishna telling her to initiate Jogen, give him the mantra. And he even told her the exact mantra to give to Jogen. And she kind of thought it was a hallucination. Maybe I'm just seeing things, I'm distraught because Sri Ramakrishna has just left. But this vision kept coming back for the next couple of days. And then she asked Sri Ramakrishna on the third day, when she's actually literally seeing him again, she says, I do not even speak to Jogen. How can I initiate him? And Sri Ramakrishna tells her to have Jogen Ma along with her at the time of initiation. And then at the same time, Jogen got a vision of Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna also told him the same thing, to get initiated by Holy Mother. So they both had visions of Sri Ramakrishna literally days after his passing. And Jogen ended up becoming her first disciple. And of course, she went on to initiate many thousands after him, but he was her very first disciple. And one thing we see about Yoganandaji that's quite unique is how intimately close he was with Holy Mother. He was one of the few people that she allowed to be very close to him, close to her, and to actually serve her on a daily basis, and he stayed with her for many years. And so he had this very unique insight into Holy Mother's spiritual stature. And I just want to read to you his narration of her days in Vrindavan, and he was with her in Vrindavan. just after Sri Ramakrishna's passing. He said, "At Vrindavan, the Holy Mother had many spiritual experiences. One day, her women companions found her absorbed in deep samadhi. They uttered the name of the Lord in her ears and tried to bring her mind down. I repeated the name of Sri Ramakrishna with all my strength. Then the mother seemed to return to the ordinary sense plane. During such periods of ecstasy, her manner of speech, her voice, her way of taking food, her way of walking, and her general behavior were exactly like those of the Master. We have heard that in deep meditation, the worshipper and the worshipped become one. The scriptures mention a spiritual state known as tadatmya bhava, being at one with God. In the same manner, the mother too forgot her own separate existence and acted just like Sri Ramakrishna, feeling her oneness with him." So you would expect her to be mourning, but in fact she identified herself completely with Sri Ramakrishna himself. Yoganandaji was a great meditator, so he would meditate for most of the day and engage in tremendous austerities, which took a toll on his body. It wrecked his digestive system ultimately. It shortened his lifespan, very likely. And Shuddhanandaji said later about him, Jogin Maharaj was so absorbed in meditation most of the time that his face would always look serene and luminous. Even when he would come from his bath, one would feel that he had just come out of his deep meditation. There's a very interesting incident where he's on a train, and while he was on pilgrimage, just a few years after Sri Ramakrishna's passing. And this was narrated by Shivanandaji. Swami Yogananda was a highly evolved soul. He was extremely handsome and had a manly body. Once he was traveling in Central Province, and he was alone in a train car. At a particular station, when the train was about to leave, a beautiful prostitute hurriedly got into the same car with her luggage. As soon as her eyes fell on Yogananda, she was infatuated and begged him, "I offer my everything to you, please accept me." When Yogananda did not respond, she became impatient and threatened him. "If you don't listen to me right now, I shall pull the alarm chain to stop the train, and I shall complain to the guard that you had molested me." She was carrying a bottle of wine in her bag. She began to drink the wine to become more excited, but it had the opposite effect. She became so drunk that she passed out on her seat. When the train reached the next station, Yogananda got off the train unharmed. "Look, what grace of the Master. Who else can protect except he?" This is an interesting incident. And from 1892 up to the end of his life, he served Holy Mother. He was one of her closest attendants. And so he had this very unique holy company with Holy Mother. And Holy Mother herself said about him, she said, "Jogin and Shorot," meaning Sharadanandaji, "belonged to my inner circle. None loved me as did Jogin." And she was devastated when he passed away. And in his last years, in 1897, Swamiji, of course, inaugurated the Ramakrishna Mission, and he did so at Balaram Bosch's house in Kolkata, and Yoganandaji was there. He was a vice president. Swamiji himself made him a vice president of the Ramakrishna order. And Yogananda sort of challenged him a bit. He said, "You are doing these things by Western methods. Would you say that Sri Ramakrishna left us any such instructions?" Swamiji, "How do you know that these methods are not in keeping with his ideas? Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment of infinite ideas. Do you want to confine him within your own limits? I shall break those limits and scatter his ideas broadcast all over the world." And it goes on. And then Swamiji said, "Time and again I've received marks of his grace. He himself is at my back and is making me do all these things." And then Yogananda says, "Whatever you will shall come about. We are always ready to follow your lead. I see clearly that the Master is working through you. Still, I confess, doubts do sometimes arise in my mind, for as we saw it, his method of doing things was so different. I am led to ask myself whether we are not straying from Sri Ramakrishna's teachings." And then Swamiji says, "The thing is this. Sri Ramakrishna is far greater than his disciples understand him to be. He is the embodiment of infinite spiritual ideas, capable of development in infinite ways. Even if one can find a limit to the knowledge of Brahman, one cannot measure the unfathomable depths of our Master's mind. One gracious glance of his eyes can create 100,000 Vivekanandas at this instant. But if this time he chooses instead to work through me, making me his instrument, I can only bow to his will." And after that point, Yoganandaji completely assented to anything that Swamiji would say. Now, fast forwarding to the last few months before he leaves his body. This is now 1898, 1899. Yoganandaji tells Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna actually appears before him about 6 months before he passes. And Yoganandaji says, Sri Ramakrishna, he would say, Thakur, Master, I don't want to be born again. The lesson of this life is enough for me. Please give me final liberation. Sri Ramakrishna said, you will have to come once more. No, I won't come, Yogananda demanded. Please release me forever. Immediately, Sri Ramakrishna disappeared. For 6 months, Yoganandaji continued to suffer physically because he was hoping that Sri Ramakrishna would grant his request finally to give him final liberation, not to have to come back again. Girish knew about Yoganandaji's resolution and then said to him, Brother, don't you know that you have been suffering terribly these last 6 months? Your pain is causing pain to all of us. Please agree to the will of the Master. Don't refuse to come back with the Master. Look here, Jogin, don't seek nirvana. Don't think of the Master as pervading the entire universe, the sun and the moon forming his eyes. Think of the Master as he used to be to us, and thus thinking of him, go to him. And then Yoganandaji said, what? I've been suffering in bed for the last 6 months? All right, let the Master's will be done. I am his servant. Whatever he asks me to do, I will do. And at that point, he finally resigned himself to Sri Ramakrishna. Right after that, on 28th March at 3:10 p.m., he left his body in Samadhi. And just a few days before that, he told Holy Mother, Mother, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and Sri Ramakrishna have come to take me. Just before Yoganandaji's death, Shivananda had asked him, Jogin, do you remember the Master? And Yoganandaji replied, yes, I remember the Master more, even more, much more. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.